All right, hey everybody. So, like Joe said, my name is Brock, and welcome to, come on, Astro, a framework for web development beyond the stars. I was gonna put music in, but I didn't want Joe to have to deal with copyright strikes on YouTube, so I'm really thinking about you. You know, yeah. So, who's heard of Astro? Who's used Astro? Okay, so Astro is kind of Astro's the new kid on the block in terms of JavaScript framework space, but it does a lot of things different than your big players like Remix, Next, Nuxt, Angular, all those, and we'll see that during the demo. So, according to Astro's docs, Astro is a framework for building fast and content-focused websites. And by content-focused, that's things like Markdown files, JSON, YAML, whatever. It loves static files. Some of its key features, it is SSR by default. Or actually, it's SSG by default, but you can use SSR if you want to. It is content focused, like I mentioned earlier. So a lot of your data is going to come from JSON files and Markdown files. It is designed to be fast and by default ships, oh, I wrote hips instead. It ships zero JavaScript to the browser unless you explicitly tell it to. And it does so in what it calls an islands architecture, meaning only JavaScript that individual component needs is going to get JavaScript. So your bundles stay very small. One really cool feature, and one of my favorite features, it is bring your own framework, meaning that yes, you can create your components using Astro components, but you can also use React, Preact, Solid, Vue, and Svelte components just fine. You can even mix and match if you want to. I don't know what kind of heathen would, but you can. And it supports a ton of other integrations, and it supports a ton of deployment options. You can just drop a Tailwind plugin in there if you want to and use Tailwind. I have a website deployed on Cloudflare Pages with Astro, and it was a very, very simple setup to get going. And I think Vercel just added official support for deploying Astro apps as well. So, okay, so a little story. Um, I came across Astro, I think maybe a year and a half ago. I don't even know if it was in version 1 yet. I was looking for a solution to build my blog in. I had been trying to get a blog set up since 2020. I started on Medium, didn't like how controlling Medium was. So then I was like, I'm going to try WordPress. And I do not like WordPress. It did not sit well with me. I hopped over to Ghost. I don't know if any of you have heard of Ghost. It's essentially another platform for building blogs, but it's in Node instead of PHP. And that's all well and dandy, except it's handlebars templates. And so anything I did, I'm building my own Webpack bundlers for, and I could not be bothered to do that because I just want to write articles and publish them on the internet. Fast forward to when I rebuilt it in Next.js, because Next is the framework that I'm probably the most familiar with at this point. And Next is complete overkill for Markdown. Getting it set up to work correctly was painful because Next is better for applications. It's not really that good for handling static stuff. Yes, it works, but probably not your best choice. So I'm doom scrolling on Twitter and I see somebody mention this thing called Astro and that their blog was in it. And I look it up and wow, did it answer all of my prayers in a framework for building static websites and more. So I'm going to be showing you guys actually the source of my blog. It is open source on GitHub, but I'm going to be showing you some of the cool things that Astro does and how building in it works, what the file structure looks like, writing components, all the fun stuff that you care about for building your websites. Okay, so let me go into my terminal. Okay. this, and I should actually probably start it up. This one, yes, okay, and I'll zoom in a little bit. Okay. So let me just close all this. So if you come from Next.js, this folder structure looks very, very similar. Your source is under, well, your source folder, components, content's a new one. I'll talk about content later. Layout could really get ducked under components. Doesn't really matter that it's there. Lib, for all your helpers. Pages. Astro is file-based routing and not directory-based routing, which I personally like because I don't like having a bunch of page.tsx files all over my application trying to figure out which one is which. And then my styles, which is just Tailwind and a couple extra styles that I've done myself. So the first thing to look at, or that we're going to look at, is an Astro component. And this is my base head component where this is, or I'm defining my props up here, similar to how you would in pretty much any other framework. Then I just use them down here to populate my metadata. You'll notice that the file looks very similar to something like Vue or Svelte, where you have your JavaScript kind of tucked away somewhere else, and then all of your markup on the actual page. So I use this file in my layout, which again, I'm just importing some components. I have a couple helper functions in here. This slot function, or I'm sorry, this slot component is what Astro uses to actually render children. So, I think in Remix it's outlet or something, and in normal React it's just a children prop. In Astro it's slot. And then in my pages, all I'm doing is importing my layout, and I'm just wrapping my content in it. Pretty simple. You'll notice I'm going to say pretty simple and pretty easily a lot tonight because Astro really does make things pretty simple and pretty easy. So you might have noticed this comment here. I have a link component that is actually React. It's a TSX file. I'm just doing some normal React stuff in here. I have my anchor tag. I'm forwarding some stuff to it because I want all those props out of it. Just a normal shared React component. And then I can import it like anything else into my Astro file. Astro's cool with it. I'm using it down here to generate some project links, and it just works. Now, it doesn't technically work out of the box. You do need a plugin for it, and that can all be configured in your Astro config file. So yes, Astro is running on Vite. Under the integration section, you'll see that I am using React. There's also Preact, Solid, Svelte, Vue, Preact. You can use those if you want. And actually, when you create a new Astro app, it will ask you if you want to include any of them by default, which is cool. Tailwind, a couple markdown settings just for my own sanity and my markdown files. This is pretty cool. So because Astro ships with markdown support by default, it actually includes things like Shiki themes. I hope I said that right. So you can style your blocks of code in your markdown by just giving it a theme. And of course, it's typed. So you get all those themes available to you out of the gate, or if you want to, you can customize and add one yourself. Really small configuration file, not really a whole lot to do in here, but it makes a lot of magic happen. Okay, so all right, let's go to some of the meat and potatoes here. So I have a blog, posts, and then a slug catch-all route. Again, if you have done anything with pre-next 13, this should look very familiar as a catch-all route. So this file is special. because I am using what's called content collections here. And this is a feature that Astro has to be able to manage large amounts of static content. I'll cover that literally right after I show this file off. Again, if you're familiar with Next pre-13, get static paths should look very familiar for building static files. All I'm doing here is I'm getting all of my blog posts from my markdown files, and I'm returning their slugs. Astro will actually generate slugs for you by default based on your file name, so you don't have to define it yourselves. And as you can see, it's typed. It's so beautiful. And then in the actual props for the page, I'm just passing in the full blog post. This is just a helper function for getting recommended articles that I show you at the bottom of the page. Again, I'm just grabbing some posts, filtering by the date they were created, sending it back. Now, this is pretty cool. So I have my props and I have my post, which comes from here in my get static paths. I get my post. I get this content component that I drop into my markup, and that's my blog post body. This all happens at build time. So when I actually build the application, what Astro does is it will go through all of my markdown files, get the content, parse the front matter, put everything in place, and then just spit out raw HTML files. Oh, yeah. So yeah, whatever post.render is doing, it's just getting the content of the post. That's all it's doing. And then, yeah, this is just normal Tailwind stuff. Got my title in here. Again, this is typed, which is great. I have my helper function to get the reading time, stuff like that. One thing that you might notice here too that I do want to call out is there's no special fun little syntax for doing loops and if statements. It's just JavaScript. I can do .map and create lists of things to render in my markup. It's so good. I don't have to remember if it's a pound or a couple slashes or I don't want to deal with it. I just want to do .map and call it a day. So this special, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. So there's this get static paths that I'm calling, and when my application builds, I get all my files, and then what this will do is it's going to pass this post as part of my props down into the actual component. It's kind of magical. um, I fully don't quite know how that works under the hood. But this is getting all of my files and basically mapping them to be static output. And yes, the naming is important. Yes. Yeah, exactly. So
Does it
yeah.
have good static stuff in bold? Does it have this thing? So it just reads. You think of the everything down here. You're like, oh, templates. That's JSX. Like that's the template language. I remember when they came up with that, and everybody hated it. And now they're like, there's no template language. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. So content collections. So yeah, this await get collections. Get collection is an Astro method that actually does, it's kind of magical. So you can see that here that I have this content folder, and under it I have a folder called posts. And this is all just Markdown. Every single one of these files is Markdown. So if I come into, like, this article that I wrote, it's just front matter and normal Markdown. There's nothing special about this. In my config.ts file, I'm actually creating the content collection for Astro to use. So you do so with this define collection method, type of collection you're defining, and then you can give it a schema of how you want your data to look. In this case, this schema actually matches the front matter on in my Markdown files. If I go back into my slug root, you can see that I have my published on, which is, oh wait, yeah, it's a string, completely typed. Zod, and this is just, it's such a good combination. I love Zod. I could do a whole talk on Zod and how awesome it is, but that's for a different time. You will notice that the name here actually matches the folder name. That is important. And then all I need to do is just export an object with my collections in it. And then I can use this anywhere in my app. So if I come back into here, this should be typed posts. It knows. TypeScript is great. So, so you can do Markdown, of course. You can do MDX, extended Markdown. You can do YAML files. You can do JSON files. Again, you get schema validation with Zod. You can do multiple collections, and you do get automatic slug generation. As you can see here, when I hover over this, Astro made this slug for me based on the file name. You can overwrite it. I'm lazy, and I don't need my slugs to be anything that special. So Astro can do it for me. So how this looks in the browser is if I come to, let's see, let it load. It's just a normal site. I can come into my blog, and that's it. So the next thing I want to talk about is JavaScript, because clearly that's kind of important here. Notice when I reload the page that my header does a fun little animation. I'm actually using Framer Motion for that. Framer Motion is a React library for creating animations, and I just dropped it in here, no problem, and it works. That's actually found in my header file. You can see that I just import it like any other component, and I use it like any other component. The difference is this: client load. If I take this away, that top part goes away. Nothing happens. I still get the bottom one because I'm still animating that, but this guy doesn't come back. Client load is one of a couple directives in Astro for actually telling Astro how to load JavaScript on your page. Client load is the most aggressive of it. It is for things that need to be interactive immediately. So this will send JavaScript when the page is requested. There is, I forget what the other one was called. I believe there's another one that waits until the page is fully loaded. If you have an element that does not need to be interactive right away, there's a directive for that. If you have something that's way at the bottom of your page that needs to be interactive, but your user won't see it for a while, there's a directive for that. There's one, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
know what I'm saying? Like what?
Yeah.
Why isn't it messing up your React? Unless it's like a React, unless that's like a version of the library meant for Astro. No.
No,
So the
it is
React
just
component
React.
is not the client.
Yeah.
So it's just an empty attribute. Yeah. Okay. I'm stupid.
But yeah. Right.
Yeah, it's probably there. Well, it probably gets ripped up, but I'm just saying, like, it doesn't matter. I think it's a valid. I think you can have attributes that. So as long as the culture, yeah, it's not going to complain.
Yeah. Yeah, you can only do these. I do want to say you can only do these in Astro files. So, you know, try. Yeah. Yeah, because if I come into my TSX here and I try to do client load, it's gonna flip out. React doesn't like it. Astro is fine with it because I'm in my Astro component. One other really React thing to watch out for when you're using React components is you still have to do class name. See? Because that's the props that it expects. Whereas everywhere else, I can just do class. Thanks, React. Yeah. Yes. Yep. So any Astro components or markdown that I do in this file with just standard HTML elements, I can do class. Because this is a React component and this is expecting class name as its props, I have to do class name. You're good, you're good. All good, all good. So this is what Astro calls its island architecture, which basically to them, if I come back into my website, this is a little island of JavaScript. None of the rest of this page is static. The only bits that need JavaScript are here in my header. So this is the only JavaScript that's going to load. It doesn't matter what I have in the rest of my app. The rest of this page is static. It makes your site really fast because you have to be crystal clear as to where you want JavaScript. If you don't need it, it's not going to ship it for you. There is one more directive that if you have a component in React, Vue, whatever, that you need to be completely interactive out of the gate, you can give it that directive, but you have to tell it what kind of component it is because Astro can't figure that out on its own. I forgot what that was called. Yes, this is in your Astro file. Yeah. Yes. Well, it would be React or Vue or whatever, but yeah. Just normal JavaScript. Like like MDX. Oh yeah. It's just I mean I think this is yeah. Because if I come back into no, this is a terrible article to use for that. That's about databases. Like next hydration, it's just markdown. Mhm. Oh yeah, that's just MDX. And Astro does it out of the box. You have to configure it. But yeah, it does do MDX as well. I'm just lazy. I haven't done it. I haven't had a need. But yes, you can do that. Yeah. Okay. So I am gonna go ahead. I was gonna show you the built output, but I actually want to talk about API routes first because Astro would not be a good little modern framework if it didn't support API routes. I mean, everybody else is doing it, may as well. So in Next World, usually you have an API folder, and then in pre-13, anything under that folder is considered API. In 13 plus, you have a route.ts file, which you do your HTTP methods in, and it does the thing for you. That doesn't exist in Astro. Astro loves things being static. So my API routes are actually it's actually something.ts. What happens is when Astro goes to build, I have my get request here. When Astro goes and actually builds, this will spit out a JSON file with all of the data that gets collected in this request. So in my page, when I actually go to make a call to this endpoint, I am getting a JSON file back. I'm not actually calling an endpoint anywhere, which is pretty cool. So if I come back into my browser now and I just do /Pokemon, oh, because it's got to be Pokemon.json, I get raw JSON back, which is really, really cool. It also supports dynamic routes, but there is a caveat to it. My site right now is running SSG, meaning if I were to build this, I would get completely static files out of it. It needs to know what every single path is expected for a dynamic route at build time, so it can build the files accordingly. I can switch it to SSR mode. It doesn't care about that as much then, because then it's more of a normal request. But if I have my name.json file, and again, I'm just using the Pokemon API here, and I'm going to grab a Pokemon by a name, right? So I want to get Pikachu. Let's see. Come on. I spelled it right. Astro blows up because I don't have get static paths, because it has no idea if there's a Pikachu.json file. Wouldn't even know where to start looking for it. To fix this, what I can do is switch to SSR mode by using output server, and I'm actually going to go ahead. Oh, I guess it rebuilt itself. Then I get Pikachu back in JSON, which is cool. And I can do it with, let's do it with Ditto. That's a Pokemon I know how to spell correctly. Pretty cool stuff. Yeah, I'll show you the lighthouse scores on my, yeah. So I'm going to turn that off. I'm actually going to get rid of this file so the build doesn't explode on me, because it will. I'm going to go ahead and kill my server, and I am just going to build the site so we can look at what Astro spits out for us. So it's going to do the things. It actually builds pretty quick. I mean, I don't really have a whole lot on here, but it builds pretty quick. So you can see we get our index.html. There's that Pokemon.json, right? There's my blog route. And then all of my posts spit out as HTML files. So now if I come back into VS Code and I go to my dist folder, oh, there's my Pokemon. It made the API request and just gave me the static JSON back in a file. Beautiful. Let's see if I go into my, oh, there's my blog posts, and there's my HTML that it built for me of my blog post of 5 databases to use for your next app. That is how Astro figures out to load JavaScript. Do you remember that this is my head component? This is what it's doing to figure out if it needs JavaScript or not for that page. That's its own special little thing. Yes, yeah, it's static, yeah. Yeah.
That's
right here. Oh, and look, there's the framer motion component. So it knows that. So yeah, it's fast though. It is very fast. If I go into, where is my, oh, here it is. If I go to my live site and I just run Lighthouse, it's, let me just tell you, I'm not getting dinged on performance. I'm getting dinged because I don't care about accessibility or any. I'm, I just want to write about JavaScript, man. Come on. I mean, it's a 95. It could be a little bit better. Um, and 2.3 seconds, I'm dinged for first contentful paint. Not horrible, but it's fast. And even the build itself, I don't know. I mean, it's Vite under the hood, but it's still pretty fast. Usually like a minute or two when I deploy to Cloudflare. It's pretty snappy. So let's see. Am I forgetting anything? So Astro version 3 just came out. Still very new. Been playing around with it a little bit. Haven't gotten too far in it. The big main feature that they are pushing for it is view transitions, which makes your static site feel like a spa, which is kind of insane. Um, I could not figure out how to get nice transitions between some of my pages. Um, but I was able to actually get it working. You can either specify it for the whole site or between components, and I got it to work for the full site. So if I go back into I think it's in my layout file. Yes. So I have my view transitions component. If I uncomment, actually, before I do that, if you see how oh, it's because I killed my server to build. I'll just go back there and restart it. This terminal is warp, by the way, in case anybody was wondering. It's awesome. It's written in Rust. Your commands are plain text, so you can actually cursor into it. Pretty great stuff. They just introduced AI for it. Got to plug them a little bit. So you can see that it's just jumping, not jumping, but page to page, not really smooth. If I come in here and I enable view transitions, yeah. So now I get nice smooth transitions between all of my pages, and my app now feels like a spa instead of being static files that are being requested with every single request. Yes. Yeah. I I think that's what they're taking advantage of. Yeah, because it was it was an experimental feature in version 2, and it literally it's brand new in version 3, and I just upgraded. The transitions are, yeah. So, but yeah, this is Astro. I mean, it is phenomenal for building static content. So things like blogs, things like documentation sites, certain e-commerce sites that have a very strict product catalog. Anything where your data is not really going to be changing that much, this is phenomenal for. Of course, you're still going to want to use your Nuxt and Next and things like that for building very data-driven applications like dashboards. Astro is just such a breath of fresh air in what really is kind of a community that's like, hey, you should be using this full-fledged application framework for building this little tiny thing. Hey, this is way better than Gatsby. I've done Gatsby. Gatsby's not fun. It needs to die a swifter death. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's like,
Hmm.
trying to show, hey, I can fetch.
Hmm.
Based on, but you give it a time.
You could. Yeah. It works with more than just JSON. Yeah. You could. Right. So if you did really anything in here that's dot something dot ts, it will give you that output. Oh, like a normal fetch from a client component. Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yes. Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, yeah, for the name file for the dynamic one. Yeah. It works with this too, because yeah, when this built, this spit out just a static JSON file. So, but that's because I explicitly said, hey, this is JSON right here, right? So you could theoretically do other kinds of files and do some kind of magic in your GET request to build another kind of file type that you want, but then it will just spit out that raw file to you at the end. So, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's very Astro is very friendly to use. I mean, I ported, like I mentioned, this blog was in Next.js, and it took me a weekend to bring it over here. I mean, I dropped my JSX in, obviously refactored some of it to be raw Astro components, but really, it did not take much time at all to pick up and learn. Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's obviously this, but then, even in something like here, if you need data, just do a fetch request. Like it will do it. I mean, you probably need JavaScript for that, but the fact that it integrates with so many other libraries, the whole ecosystem is just open. Basically, I can grab anything, almost anything from React that I want, and use it. It might take a little bit of configuring, but it'll work. Yeah, I mean, I have a plugin in here to do all my Tailwind stuff, and then MDX sitemap generation. Yeah, yeah. Any other questions? Comments, concerns, haikus, soliloquies. Yeah, that's Astro.